Venturing along this disused waterway, the Western Point Canal near Runcorn, this is as close to Christchurch as we can get, a Grade 2 listed building. Deconsecrated in the 1990s, this church was built to serve the families who lived and worked on the barges that plied the Weaver navigation. Now, technically under the care of those who operate a nearby distribution warehouse, it's not possible to visit this piece of heritage. The church looks in a sorry state, uncared for by those who own the land it sits on. The Grade 2 listing appears to count for nothing, and this fine building, and the history that goes with it, has been condemned to a slow, crumbling death. The destruction of the Liverpool Overhead Railway is captured by an amateur cinematographer in 1957. Preserved on the same roll of film, we have a brief shot of two trains passing, probably in 1956, which was the last year of the railway's operation. Opened in 1893, this was the world's first elevated electric railway, the first to use automatic signalling, electric colour light signals, and electric train multiple units. It was the world's second oldest electric metro. It ran for a distance of 7 miles along almost the entire length of the Liverpool Docks. As well as being a clean and efficient commuter railway, it was a tourist attraction. And it's not difficult to imagine how important this railway would be for today's much expanded Liverpool tourist industry. It is, however, invariably accountants, renowned for their short-sighted decisions, who hold the fate of heritage in their uncaring hands. It was cheaper to buy buses to carry the commuters than repair the ageing structure of the railway. And, of course, there would be the scrap value of the iron and steel to boost the bottom line of the balance sheet. Where are the people now who gave us this sorry-looking building, the Bebington Library and Civic Centre? Opened with a fanfare of optimism in 1971 by the Duchess of Kent, the event was captured on 8mm colour film by a member of Swan Movie Makers, a local amateur filmmaking group. Starry-eyed councillors had been convinced that the architecture of brutal concrete was the heritage of tomorrow. The modernist attitude was deeply ingrained, convincing even the film's narrator that local heritage, in the form of an 18th century house, was expendable.
The only demolition on the site was of a bungalow and an 18th century cottage, which you see here, used during its last years as the Citizens' Advice Bureau, and soon to be an extension to the newly formed lawn foreground.
Dressing up this brave new architectural world were flower beds and a fountain. These niceties now consigned to the flickering images of the Swan Movie Makers archive film. The remains of the largest Roman amphitheatre so far discovered in Britain lies just outside the Roman walls of the city of Chester. Its size is comparable to those found on continental Europe. Since the discovery of the amphitheatre in 1929, the authorities, with the power to fully unearth this historically important building, have been woefully unenthusiastic in their approach. After its discovery, the Chester Archaeological Society had to raise the money themselves to pay to divert the road that had been planned to destroy the site. Since then, less than 1/3 of the amphitheatre remains are open for visitors, historians, and archaeologists. The amphitheatre is a Grade 1 listed building, the middle part of which lies under another building, D House. This is also a listed building, so it has been argued D House can't be demolished to allow for more of the amphitheatre to be uncovered. But look at it, a picture of abandonment and dereliction. Hardly the image of Georgian grandeur as described on the information plate. More recently, a new county court building has appeared behind D House. This modern intruder sits on top of a concrete raft designed to protect the amphitheatre below. So, as they say in the blurb that justifies the burial of one of our most important pieces of Roman heritage, the site is protected for future generations. But in practical terms, surely this means the finest Roman amphitheatre in Britain will never see the light of day. Elsewhere in Chester, concrete was poured over important archaeological remains, without these being first examined by experts or even protected for the future. The remains of a Roman bathhouse now lie under the Grosvenor Shopping Centre. In a 2016 interview for a film about Chester's lost heritage, Roman guide Jonathan Easton relates the sad story.
They know that there's archaeology there. What is particularly bad about the baths is that the developer refused to give any permission for formal archaeological excavation once his building works had begun. So the site was cleared and the Roman remains in a significant state of, repair. Quite a lot of them were still there, including mosaics, including a Roman wall 200 feet long and 12 feet high in places. Basically, they were smashed up and sent to landfill.
King Louis was the king of France before the revolution. Away, haul away, we'll haul away, Joe. But Louis got his head removed, it spoiled his constitution.
Liverpool, a world-famous maritime city, is fast becoming a place without any heritage in the form of ships. The Maritime Museum once boasted that it had a collection of 20 ships. And there were other privately owned ships of national historic importance, moored in the Albert and Canning docks. But now, there are as many historic ships left as there are the figures in this sculpture of the legendary Beatles. A display board informed us that the ship called Divaden, berthed in the dry dock, was an important example of a trading schooner. But it had lain here for many years, with no work being done to either make it seaworthy or a visitor attraction. The notice remained in place long after this important historic ship was cut up and disposed of, to make space for a slavery exhibition of some sort, according to the press. How can something that was an important piece of heritage suddenly become so unimportant it had no value other than scrap? Unforgivable, surely, that this fine ship was put to death by the museum, an organisation that's supposed to protect heritage.
Away, ha! Haul away, we'll haul away together. Away, haul away, we'll haul away, Joe. Away, ha! Haul away, we'll haul for better weather. Away, haul
These are the remains of the world's first commercial wet dock, opened in the early 18th century next to the River Mersey at Liverpool. The dock closed 100 years later and was filled in and built over. At the dawn of the 21st century, the dock was uncovered during the construction of the new retail development, Liverpool One. Then, after an archaeological excavation, the dock was covered with a concrete raft, as appears to be the custom with important pieces of heritage. A viewing window was provided for anyone interested enough to try to catch a glimpse of a corner of the dock wall. But the reality is, nothing can be seen. A small portion of the dock can be visited via the basement of the multi-storey car park, through a pre-booked tour with the Liverpool Maritime Museum. Better than nothing is all that can be said about a piece of heritage that's the 18th century engineering equivalent of the space shuttle.
For the girls that we meet, they will ring, bloody hell, hurrah, the boys will homeward bound.
Sailing ship Zebo had long been part of the Liverpool maritime scene, and in recent years it became known as the flagship of Liverpool. It was sometimes said that the Zebo was an unlucky ship. It sank twice at its moorings in the Albert Dock. However, this was more to do with poor maintenance and neglect by its owner than bad luck. After the most recent sinking, she was raised and cleaned out by volunteers. Zebo was then purchased by a new owner who set about restoring the vessel. Almost £1 million was poured into the restoration work, money that came from the National Lottery and from emergency funding during the COVID-19 pandemic. The money was given out on the basis that the ship was to be part of the local maritime heritage that would benefit the people of Liverpool. However, it was rumoured that the owner, after having some specialist work undertaken at Bristol, wasn't intending to return to Liverpool. Zebo's luck finally ran out at Holyhead on her way to the Bristol shipyard. The shipwreck resulted from a combination of poor seamanship and bad weather, plus the owner's decision to replace the marine diesel engine with an underpowered battery-driven electric motor. Of course, keeping a wooden ship afloat makes huge financial demands on an owner. So had Zebo made it to Bristol and the work completed, that wouldn't have been the end of the need to keep pouring money into her upkeep. However, keeping the maritime heritage of wooden sailing ships alive isn't beyond the impossible. This ship, Havila, a Baltic trader, a similar vessel to Zebo, is alive and well in Denmark, part of a community education project for young people. Perhaps Denmark is better at looking after maritime heritage than we are in the UK. After all the depressing examples of how our heritage has been destroyed, let's finish with an uplifting story of success. The steamship Daniel Adamson, affectionately known as the Dany, was launched in 1903. It was built as a powerful steam tug to tow barges on the River Weaver, then over to Liverpool, carrying cargoes from the potteries and salt from the Cheshire mines. In later years, it had a luxury refit for use by the chairman of the Manchester Ship Canal Company. The Dany was retired in the early 1980s, and she languished in a dock at the Ellesmere Port Boat Museum until 2004. When she was brought for the princely sum of £1 by the Daniel Adamson Preservation Society. This steamship was painstakingly restored and brought back to life. Now, the Dany is much more than a museum piece. It takes passengers on regular cruises to and from Liverpool, across the Mersey, up the Manchester Ship Canal, and along its original home river, the Weaver Navigation.